what is happening between Iran and the United States, and the recent announcement by security alert by the State Department. They have sent a security alert to diplomatic personnel stating that significant escalations with Iran could be expected in the near future. They sent this alert to UAE, Qatar, Oman, Iraq, Jordan, Israel, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Egypt.
And Egypt
And,
for the first time. Yes.
yeah,
And
for the first time in Egypt. And this is, and they're talking about attacking power plants in Iran, attacking infrastructures and oil facilities. This is something new. If they do that, this is going to be a new escalation with the war against Iran, because they, before, Donald Trump was somehow bragging, saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this multiple times. He didn't do it. And
yes.
tonight he's repeating the same rhetoric. How do you see the situation? How critical, in your opinion, is the situation between the two, Iran and the United States?
Okay, so I mean, we've had news come out of the U.S. I don't think it's a surprise, multiple times in the last week or so, that Donald Trump is frustrated, that Donald Trump is exasperated. He doesn't know why Iran just doesn't surrender to him, because he seems to believe he's winning, or they should understand that he's winning. And the way Venezuela rolled over and just became a colony of the United States. That's what he expects. And he is certainly a man with a hammer, even if it's an old, outdated, bit worn hammer, bit used too much. So every problem looks like a nail, no matter how many times he hits it again and again and again. And there was this bit from the Wall Street Journal on Friday. Early on Friday, he told reporters that he planned to resume heavy military strikes to force the regime, by which I assume we mean the Iranian government, not the U.S. government, to come to the negotiating table on his terms, of course. He predicted that if the U.S. hit Iran hard enough, the hardline regime would eventually peter out. We'll be hitting them very hard, Trump said Friday at the televised cabinet meeting. And at some point, they're going to say, we just can't take it anymore. So, despite the 40 days of U.S. bombing and then another 2-week period of U.S. bombing, they're still in the mentality, if they just drop a few more bombs on Iran, that they'll eventually just surrender. That is the extent of the mentality. That is their plan. That is their strategy, such as it is. Just drop some more bombs on them and eventually they'll surrender. And we had a report out, again, we get a whole lot of reports from U.S. intelligence leaking to the Washington Post in particular, that almost seems like desperate cries from within the U.S. deep state. Not that the U.S. is attacking Iran, that's expected of the U.S. deep state, but of how badly all of this is being managed. There's a right time and a place for everything. And we've had the leaks that the Pentagon considers that continuing strikes on Iran, particularly in the context of the southern Iran coast around the Strait of Hormuz, is inexpedient, which was the word they used. That it was they weren't effective, that they were having no effect, which is, of course, also tantamount to saying that all of their strikes in the last few months have also been, therefore, ineffective, because none of them have helped the U.S. reforce open the Strait of Hormuz. And now, lacking effective strikes on military targets, it appears that they want to turn to dual use, what a military would consider dual use infrastructure, the electrical system, right? Which the U.S. regularly does in every conflict it's involved in. Perhaps I also saw nuclear power plants targeted. Bushehr, largely run by Rosatom, by the Russian state energy system, might become a target. They've long since evacuated most of their personnel. They did it during the first phase. I actually don't know if they've sent people back in since that ended. If so, I would suggest that it was probably a relatively small reintroduction of people, but also, of course, bridges and water plants and everything else. Exactly what they decry that Russia, of course, is doing to Ukraine. But, the U.S. has done it with Serbia and Iraq before, and Libya, and, every country that it has engaged in war with since World War II, essentially. So, but it's different when they do it. Iran, for its part, has been very explicit that there is a type of mutually assured destruction. That if the U.S. targets Iran's infrastructure, Iran has a hit list and will systemically destroy the energy infrastructure, the oil, the gas, and other infrastructure of every country in the Middle East hosting U.S. military bases. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, and Bahrain foremost among them, and Israel as well. And they put out a list of all of the targets they would hit, and they said that they would send the region back to the Stone Age, and that is almost Trumpian rhetoric coming out of the Iranian government, but maybe hoping that will get it through the thick head of his. So that's where it is right now. And supposedly they wanted to do this for 2 days and have it done before the markets opened on Monday, because that is the way that this Trump regime in the U.S. thinks. It is so concerned with the price of oil and the price of oil's effect on markets and gasoline prices and inflation in the U.S. that they're just obsessed with this. Get it over with, 2 days over the weekend before the market reopens. Like, they really think this way. That is their strategic window of opportunity between the market closure and on Friday and the market reopening on Monday, which, I mean, it's almost laughable, I would think. We've also had another, I take it, a plea from within the U.S. blob, the U.S. deep state, but the top U.S. general in Europe, Grinkovich, has told the press that he doesn't have the air defense resources to protect both Israel and the U.S. If there is a re-escalation of the Iran war, and that he may have to withdraw defenses from Israel in favor of defending the American homeland, which must certainly raise some eyebrows. But I take it that is, a dissenting opinion, I guess, coming from an otherwise compliant Pentagon, saying that this is madness. We can't continue. We don't have the air defense interceptors. We don't even have the standoff munitions. The Tomahawks, the JASSMs are the primary two standoff munitions that the U.S. has to use, because Iran still has functioning air defense that we found out at the end of the 40-day phase that the U.S. is very much afraid of. That they are not willing to risk their aircraft flying into Iranian airspace because they get shot down. So they still have to use this dwindling supply of standoff munitions. And when we're talking the interceptors, I mean, we've seen the effectiveness of these interceptors. We've seen 8, 9, 10 Patriot interceptors flying to try to bring down one Iranian ballistic missile at times, and failing, at least the newer Iranian missiles. So that has to call into question their effectiveness in general. So we've been here so many times, it seems already. It almost seems that we're caught in some type of Groundhog Day loop where the U.S. unable to force Iran to surrender to it economically with the dual blockade, or politically by trying to split off Oman and opening a second southern corridor through the Strait of Hormuz outside of Iran's control. But it always comes back to the bombing because nothing else seems to work. In fact, on Friday, there was even reports that, I mean, this shows how delusional, how mad they are, that they were considering a land blockade of Iran for the 5,700 kilometers of the Iranian border to include Afghanistan, Pakistan, Turkmenistan, Turkey. And, the whole Iraq, of course, the whole gamut of countries surrounding Iran. And it just seems, that they would even consider that is at all feasible. Tells us that
Armenia, Azerbaijan,
they're desperate, right? I mean, maybe Azerbaijan would play ball out of all of those. Just it's impossible to believe. And speaking of Iraq, the conflict, in the first phase of the war, it was very much true that Iraq was actually the primary battlefield between the U.S. and Iran. Indeed, most of the Israeli, some of the U.S. airstrikes occurred out of Iraqi airspace, right? But also there was a war going on the ground as well. And that is becoming true once again. And earlier this week, the U.S. and Saudi Arabia struck Iraq, and they attacked the Iraqi military, the Popular Mobilization Forces. Now, they always refer to it as pro-Iranian militia in Iraq, but the Popular Mobilization Forces are actually an official part of the Iraqi military and have been for over a decade now. So this is the U.S. and Saudi Arabia were literally waging war against the Iraqi military and government in the last week. Now, they claim that strikes that hit Saudi Arabia's Abqaiq, I'm probably murdering the pronunciation there, but oil refinery, a very important on the east end of the east-west pipeline facilities there. They say that was done by pro-Iranian militia, presumably the Popular Mobilization Forces or other groups aligned with them in Iraq. Interestingly enough, the Houthis, the Ansar Allah movement in Yemen, actually claimed credit for it, that they did it. So that's interesting. It may be an excessive claim by the Houthis. It could be just broader cooperation, of course, of Shia allies in the axis of resistance. It could be, even theoretically, I guess we could say a mistake. But that was going on in Iraq. And at the same time, all during the course of this war, right, from the very beginning, even from before it actually began, Iran has been attacking the Iranian Kurdish separatist movements based in Iraq, in Iraqi Kurdistan, they've been hitting them just continually. I mean, nearly on a daily basis. Drones, missiles, supposedly even some special forces involvement. But it's hard to find a week, without Iranian attacks in Iraqi Kurdistan. And we had the word out near the end of this last week that the U.S. was completing its withdrawal of the entirety of its military from Iraqi Kurdistan, from Erbil, that they had already moved the Patriots out of there. Of course, Iran has claimed that it has hit those Patriot systems. So I don't know what kind of condition they're in or not. We don't have any confirmation of that, but there's at least the possibility that they were damaged. And it's a further recognition that the U.S. just can't defend its military bases throughout the region, particularly in Iraq, of course, where it faces not only threats from Iran, but all of the pro-Iranian official Iraqi military and non-official militias and movements, of which there are dozens, of course, in Iraq. A lot of people don't understand that. Of course, the majority of Iraq's population is Shia. And they really don't like the way that the quisling Iraqi government that functions as a colony of the United States largely is handing, relations between their country and Iran, or, on the other side by the United States. We see how that was demonstrated on the tail end of the funeral of Iran's former supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who was assassinated, murdered by the U.S. and Israel on the first day of the war. In the last 2 weeks when his funeral was held, at the tail end of it, his body was sent to Iraq, to two cities, Najaf and somewhere else in Iraq, presumably, of course, the heart of the Shia communities of Iraq, so that they could mourn his death as well. And they turned out in the millions. So that shows very much the closeness of the Iraqi and the Iranian people, at least when we're talking about the Iraqi Shia majority on this. All of this makes Iraq a very dangerous place right now for U.S. military forces. So they are completing a withdrawal from Iraq right now, which is part of a wider withdrawal of U.S. military forces from the Middle East, which has been termed, in terms of Iranian strategy, as a strategy of debasification, of forcing the U.S. under fire to withdraw from all of its military bases. And they withdrew most of their forces to Jordan. And then we've seen how Iran has been hitting Jordan hard whenever it has. We've had these tit-for-tat strikes in the last few weeks.
Mark, just to confirm what you just said, there is a news coming out of Axios right now. It says a U.S. official told Axios that Iran has been very aggressive in recent days, with some U.S. officials surprised by the extent of which Tehran has been willing to escalate the war. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we had a 5-day period where there were no strikes by the U.S. And after the first night of not firing, the second night, Iran followed suit and they didn't fire. But then this week, I believe it was on Tuesday or Wednesday, the Iranians, out of the blue, attacked the U.S. first in Jordan, at their bases in Jordan. They seized the initiative. They didn't always before. They have been reactive, responding to the U.S. quite often in a tit for tat fashion, not willing to, escalate or take any preemptive action. Well, they reached out and smacked the U.S. across the face in Jordan earlier this week, and that shocked. I think it really shocked. It angered the U.S., of course, but it also shocked them because it was so out of place that everything that Iran has done, not only in this most recent conflict, but in episodes involving conflict with the U.S. going back years now. So that shows, one, I think that Iran has all but given up on negotiations with the Trump administration. And they're echoing what we've previously heard from Sergei Lavrov in Russia, that the U.S. is diplomacy incapable. You can't hold them to anything. That they have problems even agreeing to anything, and when they do agree on anything, they never follow through on what they've agreed on. And I would add, not only are they diplomacy incapable, they are diplomacy incompetent, because Trump exclusively just seemingly neglecting his own State Department, which he obviously doesn't trust or like in the slightest, uses the dynamic duo of his twink son-in-law Jared Kushner and his sleazy real estate buddy Witkoff as his diplomats. And of course, neither of them have any diplomatic or even international relations or any other relevant education or training or anything to fulfill that role. So that's why they're not only diplomacy incapable, they are diplomacy incompetent. So Iran has decided that in lieu of any kind of diplomatic deal, the U.S. has to be militarily forced to publicly accept that it has been defeated. Something that Trump and his delusional emperor with no clothes madness, continues to insist that he's destroyed Iran 87 times over now. I've lost count at this point. But and then all the various components and how many times he's destroyed them over and over again, as he keeps reciting as if saying so that many times will make it true. So this is a new strategy from Iran, that they're no longer willing to sit. Now, it's likely that they saw some type of imminent of some type of gathering of F-35s or something. It's also interesting. There are reports, and these are credible reports, that for that strike, Iran only launched 5 ballistic missiles, and that these were of an older liquid-fueled type, much easier, for instance, for U.S.'s failing air defense to bring down. And the U.S. claims, in fact, that all 5 of those ballistic missiles were shot down. So there's a suggestion that Iran did that purposefully, on one hand, to control the rate of escalation, right? Because they obviously felt that it is to their advantage because of the continuing effect on the global energy prices and the global energy market to keep in a low-level state of conflict with the U.S. But that they control the pace of that. So the U.S. would then reply back, but presumably they would reply back with some type of proportionality to that strike. And there's also the possibility that what they're doing is wasting their old missiles, or I shouldn't say wasting, using them very efficiently, getting the U.S. to waste what few air defense interceptors it has list. And supposedly U.S. PAC-3 interceptor stockpiles are now down to less than 800. So every 5 interceptors at this point matters. So they are also getting the U.S. to waste what air defense resources it has, bringing down, for what Iran are at this point are practically antiquated armaments and antiquated arrows in their quiver, if you will. But the U.S. is still caught flat-footed. They responded back. Iran responded back on them, and once again, they hit Jordan, and they supposedly hit some F-35 hangars that the U.S. had just rebuilt in the last few days, showing that Iran has incredible now satellite intelligence, is able to tell when the U.S. is rebuilding things, parking aircraft there. Now, we can't confirm that there were actually F-35s. The Iranians claim that they destroyed 3 and damaged 3 others. We have no confirmation of that yet from the U.S. side, but if they did hit those, it would not be, the U.S. has only let out that information very reluctantly and much further down the line whenever it does happen. So we don't know. But we do have to mention there that the price of an F-35, whatever we may think of their effectiveness, is about 80 million U.S. taxpayers pop. So that's not a small chunk of military resources that might have been damaged or destroyed in those strikes. But, again, a tit for tat, and the U.S. is left now not knowing what to do again. Let's bomb some more. That's what they're left with. They have been unable economically to force Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz. They've been unable geopolitically. And whatever they hit, Iran always has the military capability to reach out and control the Strait of Hormuz. Again, they don't have to hit every ship moving through. They just have to hit enough of them that the insurers want nothing to do with it, an insurance blockade. And Iran has so many military resources to do that. In a large way, they've planned a lot of their military around that. They have the fast attack boats. They have a number of mini subs. They have UAVs, air drones. They have USVs. They have water drones. They have, the remnants of their own navy. They have cruise missiles. They have anti-ship cruise missiles. They even have artillery that, for the short, distance of the Strait of Hormuz, they could even effectively do it with artillery. They have sea mines and have now finally mined a good portion of the southern corridor with sea mines as well, evidently, because we've seen a couple of ships trying to pass through now hit by sea mines. So they have so many options, and aircraft, and you can continue the list practically ad nauseum. And there's just really no effective way for the U.S. to take out all of Iran's resources to be able to control the Strait of Hormuz, because so much of it was built underground in hardened shelters, planning exactly for that. They have so much of that, not only in their fortress missile cities, but a number, just all in general of their military facilities where they store things. Like I saw extensive hardened shelters, tunnels, just for their fast attack boats. They're lined up in the dozens, the hundreds in these tunnels on the coast, protected from U.S. attack. And the U.S., they've used the handful of the bunker busters that they had built, specifically designed to hit Iran,